Okay, I think we're good to start. All right, so we have a very special guest joining us today. He's the most visible face of the journey for police reform, Mr. Prakash Singh. Mr. Singh was, of course, the chief of India's largest police force, the UP Police, and he was also the world's and the chief of the world's largest border guarding force, the BSF. He was awarded Padma Shri in 1991 and has since made it his life's mission to depoliticize the police. Mr. Singh petitioned in 1996 asking the Supreme Court of India to implement the 8 volumes of the National Police Commission. Overall, the idea was, of course, to decentralize police force and reform the police as we see it today. He has most recently written a book titled The Struggle for Police Reforms in India. He's joining us at the moment. Sir, thanks very much for taking time out. This has been a long pending conversation. I want to first begin by asking you, sir, it's been 16 years since the Supreme Court's decision in 2006, I beg your pardon, 16 years since 2006 in 2022 today. How satisfied are you with the implementation of the Supreme Court's directions?
I'm not disappointed, I'll put it that way, because in 2006, when the judgment came, even then I could foresee that it's going to be a long haul. And in a letter which I addressed to the senior police officers of the country, I clearly indicated that the states are going to resist the Supreme Court directions. So we'll have to, it's going to be a long struggle. So I could foresee that the implementation won't be a smooth passage. At the end of these 16 years, many people say that we have not achieved anything. But I would say that if you go below the surface, I mean, if you take a superficial view, yes, nothing has happened. But if you go down, if you dive a little below and try to examine things in depth, you'll find that things have started changing in many respects. Say, I'll give a few examples. Government of India has conceded the concept of a smart police. Smart, you know what smart means: a sensitive police, a mobile police, an accountable police, a responsive police, a techno-savvy police. If this concept they have accepted, and the acceptance of this concept, I think by itself is a significant step forward. Secondly, the idea of police reforms and the Supreme Court mandated directions has is sinking, I would say, not sunk, but is sinking into the consciousness of the people. And whenever there's a problem, a serious problem relating to performance of police, and the same is criticized by people, they always go back to police reforms. They say, why are reforms not being implemented? And because the reforms are not being implemented, therefore we have to witness such a miscarriage of justice, such a misdemeanor by the police, such abuse of authority by the police, etc., etc. I mean, and you see the editorials of the national dailies, they always revert to the Supreme Court mandated reforms and why are those not being implemented. And social media is full of references to police reforms. So it has captured the imagination of the people. Thirdly, if you see, the political parties, willy-nilly, they are mentioning police reforms in their manifesto. Maybe they mention it and subsequently don't implement after coming to power. That's a different matter. But they have conceded this point that yes, police needs to change and these changes need to be carried out. So I would say that, and then if you examine the level of compliance by the state governments, and I'm seeing a level of compliance as reflected in the affidavits, not on the ground. Every state is careful to be on the right side of the Supreme Court, lest they are hauled up for contempt. So on paper, they are all claiming that, no, we have complied with your directions and we have done this and we have done that. What they have done may be farcical. It may be more for show than in substance. But they are all claiming that we have done. Now, mind you, when you concede the ground like this, that we are doing this, I mean, some steps you are forced to take, howsoever reluctantly, unwillingly, forced to take some steps in the direction of reforms. So some steps have been taken. And if you have read the book, I think I have said that there are 6 states which, at least on paper, they show a fair degree of compliance. 6 states. The majority, of course, 14, 15 states have shown just average compliance, and 5 are very poor. But 6 states, Andhra Pradesh, Arunachal, Goa, Karnataka, Manipur and Mizoram, they show a good level of compliance. So there is some forward movement. I would say there is a faint light at the end of the tunnel, but this light, I expect that to sort of grow in volume, grow in in its luminosity in the years to come.
Mhm. 6 days, 16 years later, I don't think you would count that as a lot of progress, but as you pointed out, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. But what's taken so long, sir? We talk about police reforms. I mean, everybody, as you rightly pointed out, every time we switch on our TVs, every time we read the newspaper, we talk about how police is not doing enough, how perhaps inadequate our police force is, and especially as journalists, we are very hell-bent on going after the police. So what's taken so long for the police to reform?
It has taken so long, and it will take many more years for the simple reason. You see, what is the most powerful combination in India? Can you tell me? It is the politicians and the bureaucracy. If they combine, they can defeat any force in the country. They can humiliate even the Indian Defense Forces. The police is much smaller in stature. And neither the politician in power nor the bureaucracy, neither of them are interested, and for them it has become a vested interest. They inherited this from the British and they find it intoxicating. And once you get used to a certain level of intoxication, then you just want to continue with that. You want to continue with that because it gives you a lot of authority, a lot of power over the police, power to transfer, power to punish, power to make them do whatever you want. Most importantly, from the politician's point of view, book the opposition and protect my own flock. That's how it is, as simple as that. And every party, when it comes to power, finds it very convenient. I remember, today you have a different party in power, but when the UPA was in power, I remember a famous statement by Digvijay Singh, a famous Congress leader from Madhya Pradesh. He said, "Hamare paas CBI hai." What do you mean by "Hamare paas CBI hai"? He was just threatening the opposition that, look, I have the CBI and I can fix you. So that is, everyone, whosoever is in power, wants to misuse and abuse the enforcement machinery at their disposal. That is the problem. So it's some kind of a very strong, very well entrenched vested interest of the most powerful forces in the country. And on the other hand, you have, I would not say the entire police force, but majority of the police force, especially the middle level officers and the younger officers, who see a career ahead of them and who feel suffocated in the existing arrangement. The top leadership is not so keen on reforms because they are at the end of their innings, and they have probably reached that position by following a certain line, which would not be approved if the reforms are implemented. So they are lukewarm about reforms. They may say yes, they may no, but the mid-level officers and the younger officers are for reforms. So on the other hand, you have these police officers, and they have, you can say, support from the judiciary, which is not always vocal, which is not always enthusiastic. It is by fits and starts. At times you have judges who are very keen on reforms, and then you find some push to the agenda. But most of the time, you find judges who are wary of handling this case. They don't want to handle this case because it's very complicated, and it would mean doing something which the government may not like.
Okay. In your book, sir, you've argued that it's not just the ruling government, sometimes it's also the opposition and the bureaucracy that is reluctant to reform, and the senior police officers, of course. What exactly is the love for status quo here? Why exactly is there a problem with reforming, especially for the opposition parties? Because I think it's in their favor if they call for reforms.
They talk of reforms half-heartedly when they are in opposition. But once they are in power, they feel that, no, this is the police must be under our control, under our thumb, and we should be able to call the shots, we should be able to dictate terms, and we should decide the direction and the shape which police working would take in its day-to-day functioning. That is the problem. Everyone wants to misuse and abuse the police. That is the crux of the matter. And whatever they may say in opposition, as I said, reluctantly, half-heartedly, but once they come to power, they forget all that.
Right. In your book, you've also given a historical perspective, the origin of the Indian police. The book actually traces the evolution of the police from the British rule and subsequently to independence and therefore after independence. For the benefit of our viewers, I want to understand from you, how much has the police machinery changed since the Police Act of 1861? Are we still continuing with some of the archaic provisions?
The police machinery has not changed very much, because if you read the 1902 Fraser Commission report, it says the police does not enjoy the confidence of the people. It is oppressive. The supervision is lax, and police does not measure up to the expectations of the people, things like that. And then at one place they say, and therefore radical reforms are necessary. Now, if you read that 1902 report, and someone were not to tell you that this is a 1902 report, you would probably say that this must have been written in 2020 or maybe 2015, because whatever was said then is equally true today, if not more. Now, the police has not changed very much since then, because certain other developments of a very pernicious kind have taken place, which were not there in 1902. 1902 problems were there, but of a simpler nature. Now problems have got aggravated because of two factors. Those two factors are criminalization of police and politicization of crime. This has happened, and this has happened during the last about 25, 30 years. And this has made the situation very murky, very, very, very unpleasant, and very depressing. So in a way, it is today worse than what it was. In many respects, it's very much better, because in terms of equipment, in terms of resources, in terms of transport, in terms of communication, in terms of your mobility, you are far better. You're far, far better. And you have all the gadgetry which gives the impression of a modern police force with all the weapons. But that is the exterior. That is the exterior. From inside it is, you can say, there's cancer inside, you can say. Cancer inside, in the sense that you do not have functional autonomy. You are under the thumb of someone. You have to obey the dictates of someone, right or wrong, legal or not so legal, but you have to carry out those orders. That is the problem. That's a problem which is inside the system. Outwardly, you can say, yes, they are better dressed, better equipped, better resourced.
You mentioned something very interesting. You said two factors that is leading to status quo. One is the politicization of the police force. The other is the criminalization. We all understand what is politicization. What is criminalization of police force? How would you explain that?
No, criminalization, you have seen what happened in Mumbai, where the police commissioner was at the beck and call of the ruling party, obviously, though they won't admit it, was acting as an extortion agent, collecting money from bars and all restaurants and whatnot. About 100 crores every month he was giving to the Home Minister. This is a criminal act. It's a criminal act. And similarly, I mean, there are examples from other states, not as blatant, but yes, there are examples from other states also. I mean, there was a time, not today, in UP, when districts were auctioned by the chief minister. If you want to be SSP Kanpur, all right, you deposit 40 lakhs in my account, then you go as SSP Kanpur. SSP would say, sir, I don't have that much money, I can't give you, it's just not possible. Oh, the chief minister would say, all right, you give in installments. Installments were fixed. And the day he defaulted in installments, within a week thereafter or within a few days of thereafter, he got the transfer orders. So, I mean, this is all criminalization. I mean, you are making the superintendents of police do criminal acts because you want certain things to be fulfilled, certain things to be done. How would he collect 40 lakhs of rupees, except that he would extort from A, B, and C in his jurisdiction? So there has been criminalization of police, and a lot of dirty things which we have to do is at the behest of people above. Of course, when you are doing a lot of dirty things at the behest of people above, you also become a party to it, and then you also start, I mean, a good part is siphoned off for your own use also. I mean, you get into the rut, shall I say?
Mhm. That's very interesting. I don't think anybody else would have been able to share that insight, sir. One incident that you mentioned where you were in a dilemma, in a position of dilemma, perhaps, or not so much in a position of dilemma because you were removed as the UP DGP at the peak of the Ram Temple movement. You mentioned during the Kalyan Singh's government, you were asked to dilute the police presence at the disputed Babri Masjid site. You refused to do that. You were removed and then you were brought back. Can you tell us what happened there?
No, but let me tell you, a combination of factors contributed to my ouster. I mean, this is one of the factors. They were unhappy that I was not falling in line with them. And my unfortunate experience those days was that, you see, meetings used to be held by, I mean, meetings were attended by Chief Minister, about half a dozen cabinet ministers, the Chief Secretary, the Principal Secretary Home, the Director General Police, the Director General Intelligence. At all these meetings, they would discuss the security arrangements in and around Ayodhya, and they would want certain things to be diluted, scaled down. Not that I just disagreed. I mean, I would agree with some of those, and then at a point, beyond a point, I would say, no, beyond this, it is not possible, because there are orders of the Supreme Court that the status quo has to be maintained. And the disputed structure should not be, there should be no harm to the disputed structure. I mean, I'm sorry to be saying this, but I was the one and the only person who would speak like that, frankly. The Chief Secretary would keep quiet, the Principal Secretary Home would keep quiet, the DG Intelligence would keep quiet. I was the lone dissenter at these meetings. So once they felt that probably I may not, I would not fall in line with whatever plans they may be having. This was one of the factors, but there were a whole lot of other factors also. I mean, I was having a tough time with the bureaucracy. See, the bureaucracy always wants to dominate the police, and I was I was a very strong-headed Director General Police. I was very clear on one thing, that if you issue any orders which are not in public interest, which would and which would not be good for police morale, I will not carry them out. It was as simple as that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there was a whole lot of orders which I used to get from the Home Department, which I thought were unacceptable to me. And so what I would do, my modus operandi was that firstly, I will hold these orders in abeyance. Then within a week or so, I will go and meet the Chief Minister, discuss all those orders, convince him that these orders are wrong. He would say, all right, you write back to the Home Department that you have discussed this with the with the Chief Minister, and for reasons A, B, C, D, which you are giving just now, you are not carrying out. I mean, these orders may be withdrawn, and this has been approved by the Chief Minister. So I think about 8-10 files were sent back by me like that. The Home Department did not like that at all. And they felt that here the DGP was going, becoming very strong, and he's defying the Home Department. I was defying not for any personal reasons. I was defying in public interest. Yeah. So they said, no, this DG has to go. This was another factor which you see, as I said, there were a combination of factors. One, there was a leakage of an intelligence report, which annoyed me very much. And I got an FIR registered at the Hazratganj police station for that leakage, that there's a breach of Official Secrets Act. Now, that was not liked by the bureaucracy, because they thought, I may take action against one of them, whom I considered responsible. So they said that now this DG is doing things which are unacceptable to the government. So they poisoned the ears of the Chief Minister, and they persuaded him to give me marching orders. Mm-hmm. So it was a combination of factors, not just the temple and matters connected therewith.
Mm-hmm. Some very interesting things you said there, but I want to first ask you, how do you explain your position to a perhaps young police officer in force today, given the country is very divided? You say that you were pro-Ram Mandir, but your duty was to the people of this country. How do you explain that ethical dilemma, if at all you faced at that point in time? How do you, yes, how
this dilemma was there, but
yes, sir.
No, I mean, it is mentioned in the book that when you are in uniform, enforcing the rule of law is the highest religion for you. Your personal faith, your personal likes, your personal dislikes, your personal predilections should not come in the way. What is the rule of law? What does the rule of law dictate? That is what you have to enforce. I was very clear on that, and this is what I tell IPS probationers also, that you have to enforce the rule of law. Your personal likes, dislikes, your personal convictions and faith, that does not matter at all. That does not matter. That you should keep separately. And once you start mixing them, then there's problem. There's only one religion, and that is you have to enforce the constitution and the laws of the country. That is your highest. That is your Bible. That is your Ramayana. That is your Gita. That is your Gita.
Okay. So your personal inhibitions aside, your personal political affiliations aside, you need to follow the rule of the law because you're enforcing directly.
Because the country looks up to me in that capacity. Here is the Director General Police, a man who is heading a force. Then it was 180,000. What he dictates, what he orders, will be carried out by this force. And if I start issuing wrong orders, then what message will go? Mm-hmm. Everyone should know that he is strict on his principles, and we have also to follow his line.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to come back to your PIL, sir, because in your PIL, you argued that we would, and I'm quoting verbatim, that we would have been saved from the trauma of several riots, massacres, scandals, and scams if the police had not become a pliable instrument in the hands of the executive. Can you give us some examples of what riots, massacres, scandals, or traumas we could have been saved from? Because for someone who's learning from the history, because history is often a reflection into the future, how exactly can we learn from our past?
Now, I'll give you two examples. One, the most daring example is the 1984 anti-Sikh riots in Delhi, in which about 4,000 Sikhs were massacred in Delhi. Now, Delhi is the best resourced police in the country, and but the Delhi police, barring some honorable exceptions of Delhi police, otherwise force was by and large inactive. And they were inactive. Why? Because the hoodlums in the streets, those who were committing arson, those who were committing violence, they belonged to the ruling party, or they were egged on by the ruling party, or they drew inspiration from the ruling party. So they said, what do we do? These are members of the ruling party. How do we take action against them? So they remain mute spectators to all the carnage which happened in Delhi. Now, I'm not saying that these incidents would not have happened. Either they would not have happened, or even if they had happened, their gravity would have been very much less if the police had not been under the control of the executive, and if they knew that their duty is to enforce the rule of law, their duty is to protect life and property. If that had taken priority in their consciousness, such large number of killings would not have taken place. That is one example. Another example is the emergency. What happened during the emergency? I mean, I was a young police officer at that time. I had not much of experience, but I remember, from Lucknow, the superintendents of police were getting model FIRs. That, look, this is the kind of FIR which has to be registered. Now, you can't have a model FIR. Every case is different. Every crime is different. But model FIR, that this kind of FIR, and with these FIRs, you book all those people who belong to the opposition, particularly those who are from the BJP and the RSS. Now, that was atrocious. But the police carried out those orders, and fictitious FIRs were registered against a whole lot of people. Some of them were thorough gentlemen, and most of them without any criminal background. But they were all arrested and put behind bars. So, this is something absolutely atrocious, unacceptable, and abominable. But it happened during the emergency. So, I've given you two examples, but there are a whole lot of other examples from different states which could be given, which either would not have happened, or if they had happened, their gravity, their severity, and the tragedy associated with them would have been of a much lesser nature.
Okay. So political interference, essentially the NPC recommendations was also to create an organizational structure to prevent direct political interference in the police functioning. Yet, some would say NPC failed to address it. We continue to see direct political interference. We continue to see police excesses in the state. How much do you think has changed, sir, if at all? And where do you see this going forward from here on? Because as we discussed already, it's been about 16 years now. Not much has changed.
You see, the National Police Commission made a very salutary recommendation to insulate police from extraneous influences. They said that every state should have a state security commission. And the state security commission should comprise of men from public and men from government. Representatives from government, representatives from the civil society. And they should be evenly balanced. evenly balanced, say about 50% from civil society, 50 from government, so that it doesn't show any tilt. And representative from civil society should be drawn from, you can say, distinguished citizens, human rights activists, retired civil servants, lawyers, just anyone who has a good reputation for integrity and probity. He should be taken in that. Now, this was a very salutary recommendation, and this was one of my prayers, and this was conceded by the Supreme Court, and this became directive number 1 of the Supreme Court out of the 7 directives which they issued, 6 for the states and 1 for the central government. This was the most important directive to insulate police from outside pressures. Now, on paper, if you read my book, almost every state has constituted a state security commission, but their compliance is farcical in the sense that instead of taking members who are independent, men who are of integrity, they have, even if they have taken people from civil society, they have taken people who are known to be pro-government, government supporters, or you can say government stooges. Now, once you do that, then you have diluted the composition of the State Security Commission. And as I said, you have not complied with the direction in spirit. In letter, you can say you have taken people from civil society. Then quite a few states have changed the composition of the State Security Commission itself. It is headed by a Home Secretary or somebody from the administration, and they have a majority of representation from the government, like the Bihar Police Act, for example. So, I mean, either the composition has been diluted, or the powers have been curtailed of the State Security Commission. The result is that the Security Commission is either dysfunctional or it is ineffective. And if you start examining the working of the State Security Commission, you will find that they have not met for more than a year. I mean, they're there on paper. It was constituted, but they're not doing anything, and they're not making any recommendation. So the compliance has been very farcical, and the National Police Commission had given very salutary recommendations, and the PIL which I filed, the prayers which I made, were essentially, I drew inspiration from the National Police Commission recommendation about the State Security Commission, about the Police Establishment Board, about the Complaints Authority. All that inspiration came from the National Police Commission. But unfortunately, as I said, the states have not complied with the recommendations either in letter nor in spirit. And therefore, we do not see any change in the ground situation. I mean, that is the tragedy of in the aftermath of the issuance of directions by the Supreme Court.
Okay. You mentioned 6 to 7 states that have done better than the other states in the country. On what parameters have they fared better?
On parameters, generally, I mean, the details are given in the book in the composition of the State Security Commission. There is less of dilution, and I examined them under all the 6 headings: the State Security Commission, Police Establishment Board, State Complaints Authority, appointment of Director General Police, 2-year tenure for police officers in the field, and separation of investigation from law and order. Under all these 6 heads, I evaluated the respective states, and I found that these states had got more numbers than most of the other numbers. So I said their compliance on paper, again I repeat, on paper, is better than that of the other states. Okay. There was a Thomas Commission which was expected to examine the ground situation, but they made a poor job of it, and even after 2 years, they studied the ground situation only in 4 states. The other states were not studied. And
you've been especially critical of the Thomas Commission. Why is that?
Because I saw their functioning. I witnessed at least 8-10 sittings of the Thomas Commission, and it was terrible. I found it very frustrating because, you see, half the time, number one, you see, there was Justice Thomas, and then there was a retired IS officer, and there was a serving IPS officer. There was a serving IS officer and a retired IPS officer. Now, half the time, the IS and the IPS officers were having problem. They were at loggerheads on what was to be done. And I mean, my assessment is I mean, you can say I'm being just because I'm supporting an IPS officer, but it is my objective assessment that the IAS officer was carefully chosen to ensure that the Thomas Committee does not make any headway. He was just planted to ensure that it's I mean it just doesn't make any progress. It is sabotaged. So the Thomas Committee was not able to make any headway. I mean, Justice Thomas, he could have uh, shouted at the person who was not being reasonable and said that, no, you are trying to derail the proceedings. He could have done that, but he was too much of a gentleman for that. He would always just try to find a balance between A and B. And in trying to find a balance, I found that he was not able to make any headway. So probably this composition was one factor, and well, they could have given much more time to it, and they could have. I mean, they could have gone to more states. They could have gone to more states. I mean, they would sit in 1 month. They would have one sitting, maybe 1 day sitting, maybe 2 day sitting, and that also just for 2 hours or so, which I thought was quite inadequate. They could have, after all, this was a very important commission, and a more comprehensive evaluation could have been done, and a much better report submitted to the government of India.
Okay. One of my major takeaways from your book is that bureaucracy, often the misgivings that we have with the bureaucracy are often correct. That they sit through the process, they are not quick to adjust, that they are one of the reasons why we have this concept of red tapeism in the country. What exactly were some of the large glaring issues that you faced with bureaucracy while you were at task, and thereafter, of course, in your, in the last 25 years of your activism? What were your major takeaways with how and where bureaucracy in this country is lagging?
You see, bureaucracy, I mean, I would say there are excellent officers in the Indian Administrative Service, absolutely excellent officers. Some of the officers, I mean, some of the finest officers I work with. I mean, there would be many others whom I do not know. I mean, Madhav Godbole was a gem of a person. He's no more. Mr. G.K. Pillai, he's a gem of a person. And a thorough gentleman. Mr. Naresh Chandra, he was cabinet secretary, excellent officer. So they are absolutely excellent officers in the administrative service, but a large number of them, I would say their number is not less than 70%. They are a different kind altogether, and they just want to maintain the preeminence of the Indian administrative service in the governmental structure at any cost. At any cost. If the people suffer, let them suffer. If other services do not get a fair deal, let them not get a fair deal. But our preeminent position should be there in the organizational structure of the government of India. So that is something which really hurt me. I think the country is above any service. But when you hurt the interests of the country while trying to uphold the preeminence of your service, then I think you're doing disservice to the country, and that is unpardonable. I'll give you one example. I was a deputy inspector general. In UP, we used to have a police week. I mean, for 1 week there was a jamboree, there was a police parade, and there was a dinner, and there was a conferences, and there was a welfare meet, and all kinds of things spread over a period of 1 week. Now, one of the items during that police week was that the chief minister would come, and in front of him, service-related matters and police-related matters to improve policing in the country would be presented. And this job was given to about 4 officers would be picked up. One will take up issue A, another will take issue B, another C, another D, like that. Generally, the most unpleasant things were entrusted to me, which an officer would hesitate to say. They would say, Prakash, कुछ भी बोल देंगे तो इनको ये दे दो, बाकी लोगों को थोड़ा softer दे. So we raised this issue about police commissionerate in Kanpur. That was in the 70s. And believe me, the chief minister was agreeable. He said, yeah, he announced that, yes, it sounds reasonable and we'll have police commissioner. A public announcement was made, and then government went ahead and they selected also. Mr. Vasudev Panjani was designated, he's no more now. He was designated as the commissioner designate of Kanpur. And then a team was constituted comprising the state home minister, the home secretary, and Mr. Panjani, the commissioner designate, that they will go to different parts of the country, study the commissioner system, and then frame a commissioner of police act for Kanpur. Now, all this took about, this exercise took about a month or so, but this month also gave time to the bureaucracy. While these gentlemen were on tour of the country, studying commissionerate system in Pune or Mumbai or elsewhere, the bureaucracy sabotaged the proposal. By the time they came back, we were told that there'll be no commissionerate in Kanpur. So this is how bureaucracy functions. This is how bureaucracy functions. I found it absolutely frustrating. What is this? The chief minister had made this announcement. It took another 40 years. It took another 40 years. And Yogi Adityanath, the chief minister, it was entirely his own decision. I won't give credit to anybody else. It was entirely his own decision. He decided that no, there should be commissionerate, and he implemented it. I say this because within a few days of his taking over, I had met him, and when I had gone with my suggestions to improve policing in the country, but this was a point I was hesitant. I thought I'll mention this after a month or so, but on his own, he said that no, we'll have commissionerate system in some of the metropolitan cities. So it was entirely his own decision, and he implemented this of 40 years later. I mean, later than it was announced. So this is how bureaucracy functions and scuttles proposals relating to improvements in policing.
Okay. Okay. Back to police reforms, sir. One of the major concerns with the police reforms is the accountability of the police. Many would say that, and many would question, as a matter of fact, who exactly is the police accountable to? Is it accountable to the law, to the people, or to the political masters? Because there's a bit of a gray area here. And in your book, of course, you talk about the threefold accountability. Can you perhaps explain to us where does the accountability of the police lie, and why exactly is the accountability often hampered? Because we often hear about police deniability, we often hear about records of arrests that are missing, detentions that are not on record. So absence of records, of course, somehow hampers, I believe, the accountability.
Now, accountability should be primarily to the law of the land and the people of the country. That is what the National Police Commission says, and I entirely agree with it. But what you see in actual practice, I mean, this is the hard truth. It is the grim reality that accountability is to the political executive of the country. If an order comes from the political executive, that order has to be carried out, irrespective of what the law of the land may say, irrespective of what the constitution may say. It is the executive authority which prevails ultimately. So it's I mean, this is where things have gone wrong. And even if you swear by the constitution, this, that, I mean, if you insist on enforcing the accountability to law, you suffer in the process. You find that next day you are out, because they have the authority to shunt you out, they have authority to humiliate you, to suspend you, this, that. I mean, I faced the threat even of suspension at one stage in life. Fortunately, that order could not materialize. But for doing absolutely correct things, for carrying out a crusade against corruption, I was threatened with suspension by no less a person than the Home Minister of India. So the accountability is ultimately to the political executive. So accountability has gone haywire. I mean, it's all topsy-turvy.
Okay. So it's primarily to the law, then to the people, but clearly not to the political master. But it's the other way around, is what we see. Right. At the start of this discussion, we also talked briefly about the police excesses. Now, excessive policing is also a major concern with the people today. Often Human Rights Commission have to intervene and ask police to investigate themselves, which is also a very rare occurrence. There is a lot of talk about custodial death, about torture, and that often makes the news. How do you see this changing in the last couple of years, if it has at all? Because as a layman or even as a journalist sitting on the other side, I still continue to feel that the police is very little friendly towards people in general.
No, I would not dispute your observation. It is a fact that they are not very friendly with the police, which is what they should be. And see, the roots of this, you have to analyze really. Number one, the kind of people who are joining the police, they're mostly from the rural background, lower middle class people. No, that's okay. No problem with that, provided you train them properly, you educate them properly. Our training infrastructure is very poor. Our training curricula is outdated, And if you visit any training institution, you will be appalled by the kind of infrastructure that prevails and by the kind of books that are being taught to them, and what is worse, the kind of instructors who are there. Because the most frustrated, the most rejected people are posted to the training institutions. The result is that our training institutions are not able to impart them the kind of idealism, the kind of motivation, the kind of service attitude which they should be having. So you don't come from a very polished or sophisticated background, then you don't get very good training, and then suddenly you find yourself exposed to all the hard realities of daily existence and daily functioning. And there again, there are certain things which start demoralizing you. Your living conditions, your working conditions. Living conditions, I mean the quarters that you are living in. Maybe they are generally in bad shape. I mean, only a few years back or 2 years back, I read an article about Delhi police living in slum-like conditions. Now, if Delhi police have to live in slum-like conditions, what is happening? What would be happening to people in the interior areas can well be imagined. Their housing conditions is very poor. See, the National Police Commission said that the non-gazetted officers should have 100% satisfaction, housing satisfaction. We have been able to give only 31%, and that also not of very good quality. So housing conditions are poor. Working conditions are very severe. If you read the status of policing report, an average policeman is working anything from 14 to 16 hours a day. Now, when you work for 14 to 16 hours a day, I mean, what would be, how much of energy and how much of enthusiasm would be left in you? I mean, when you go back home, probably you are exhausted, and then you don't behave well with your wife, you don't treat your children well, and the overall frustration of the work gets reflected in your day-to-day handling of the men. A lot of situations happen where you are, when you are on the right, you are penalized. You are penalized to diffuse the situation. You are made the bali ka bakra, so to say. And this happens most when police has a confrontation with the lawyers. Let me tell you, examine any number of confrontations between police and lawyers across the country. However correct the police might have been, it is always the police which has been penalized. It is always the police which had to take a back foot, and the lawyers who stood vindicated. In no confrontation between police and lawyers has the police role been upheld or supported by government. Government also finds it easy, भैया 2-3 आदमी को सस्पेंड कर दो, 4 आदमी को सस्पेंड कर दो, ये बवाल खत्म हो जाए, वो तीनों का बवाल खत्म. I mean, that is the kind of a whole lot of situations. I tell you, this is just one example. Whole lot of situations where policemen are sacrificed just to diffuse a situation. All this builds up into a sense of frustration, some kind of frustration, and that look, I'm not getting a fair deal. I'm not being given my due in terms of promotion, and then on the other hand, the chances of getting punished are always there. You see, one high court gave a very funny judgment. Would you believe it? I mean, I would doubt the sanity of it, that whenever there's an encounter, anywhere, under any circumstance, a case of murder should be registered against the policeman. Without going into the merits of the case, first you register a case of murder, and he says, and the judge very conveniently says, that this case can be later on expunged. What nonsense are you talking? But this is the kind of environment we have to live in and we have to work in. I said that if this judge's views were to prevail, every policeman will say, I will not wield any weapon. If somebody comes with a weapon and shoots anybody, let him shoot. I don't want a case of murder to be registered against me. I didn't join the police to be branded as a murderer. Yes, after 6 years, after 10 years, you will say, oh, the FIR is expunged and you are exonerated. What does that mean? After 10 years of humiliation?
So playing a little devil's advocate here, because often, encounters and often unsolicited encounters that are unmerited, and often done to gain sympathy, popularity, are also at question. I want to draw your attention to what happened in Hyderabad after the rape accused were clearly encountered and then also lionized by the state machinery and praised by the localites, and then now are currently facing the law of the land. What do we do in those cases, sir, where encounters are not needed, done to mobilize and gather support?
No, first of all, let me admit, though that is in a different category. I concede those are bad. Those are bad instances where police exceeded their jurisdiction, did something which was unpardonable, inexcusable, and then they should be dealt with for that. But what I had in mind when I was talking a few minutes back, I had in mind, I mean, situations which you are facing in Kashmir, which you in Chhattisgarh, in Nagaland, in Manipur. There you are fighting insurgents. You are fighting men who are equipped with the sophisticated weapons, who are perhaps getting those weapons from a foreign country, and who are waging war against the government. When you are going in an operation against them, you will have an encounter. Under those circumstances, if you are going to have a golden balance, why did you use this much for? Why did you fire 10 rounds when you could have done with 5 rounds and 4 rounds? I mean, this kind of measurement of how much force you used and how much would have been enough, that is very demoralizing. So anyway, you mentioned Hyderabad encounter. It was one of the worst instances, and I do not justify it. And the Sirpur Commission has given its findings. I agree with it. My only regret is, I do not know whether it was part of the Commission's mandate, but why have the senior officers not been held accountable? Why has the political executive not been left out? You see, it's the politicians lionized the police officers. The senior officers feted the junior officers. The senior officers took the garlands and did everything, and they talked in support of the encounter. And there were a whole lot of people supporting the encounter. What happens to those people? It is not enough that you punish a few subordinate constables and be done, and you say, now my conscience is clear. No, my conscience is not clear. If you had to punish, let me tell you what happens in these cases and why things go wrong. When such instances happen, it is not uncommon for a senior politician or a senior officer to tell the man in charge of operations, देखो भाई ये 3 दिन के अंदर काम हो जाना चाहिए, 3 दिन के अंदर सालों को पकड़ लो, something must be done, देखो बड़ा एजिटेशन हो जाए. Now, 3 दिन के अंदर कुछ न कुछ कर दो. जब ये हो जाता है कि 3 दिन के अंदर कुछ दिन करना, then this is what happens. Look, I have served in Punjab, I have served in Kashmir, and I have served in Punjab during the worst days. Let me tell you, every politician who came to Punjab those days, and I'm talking of 87 to 91, when terrorism was at its peak. Mr. Gill was as Director General Police, I was Inspector General Border Security Force. Of course, there were other senior officers also. Every politician had the same advice to us. Do whatever you can, but finish this terrorist movement. Do everything, do whatever you can, but finish this terrorist movement. And so Punjab police went hammer and tongs against them. But what happened later on? What happened later on? Any number of cases were filed, any number of complaints were made by Human Rights Commission, this, that, with the result that, mind you, a lot of excesses were committed which were avoidable. I admit that. But I think we need to have a different measuring scale when you are dealing with an insurgency and when you are dealing with a normal situation. If you have the same scale for both situations, then I think police, no force is really going to operate in full steam. Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult.
My concern, sir, is when the police becomes judge, jury, and executioner, there is little accountability. There is, and that I think is very dangerous, especially
very dangerous. I entirely agree with you. I'm not entering into any argument with you on that subject. The police cannot encapsulate all the 3 roles. It is not their job. And you see, there's no need for false encounters. There's no need for false encounters. See, I mean, cases can be worked out even otherwise. It may take some time. But cases are worked out. People can be arrested. It's a slow process, but it works. It works. And I found even in dealing with terrorist problem in UP, we had a serious problem in Tarai. And mind you, Tarai area is geographically larger than Punjab. Of course, it was not in that scale or not of that gravity. But we dealt with the terrorist problem and without leaving any legacy of bitterness. There were no complaints of false encounters in the Tarai area. So terrorist movement can also be dealt with. But but then it would have dragged on perhaps for another, after we would have needed 2 other Gills after one. One would not have been enough to carry on the battle against terrorists, and the battle would have gone on for another 10, 15 years.
Mhm.
And it
Oh,
was a very serious situation threatening the stability of the country. So government went all out to crush terrorist movement in Punjab.
right, right. Since we were talking about the larger trust deficits between people and the police, which is also one of the large cornerstones of your book, a lot of contemporary events have basically ensured that there is the trust deficit has now increased. For example, when there is police supervised demolitions of houses of those people who are protesting against the government. What do you do in those cases? Because that's clearly not following the rule of the law. That is clearly not a police that is pro people, and that also results in fear mongering amongst people who are critical of the government, especially journalists. I must say, we think twice before criticizing the government because we know the police may come knocking at our doors today. What do you make of these contemporary events?
Uh, you have given your own conclusions, but I remember there was a perception survey by India Today. I think MARG is a body which India Today commissions to evaluate situation in different states. And in the last evaluation which they had done, India Today, in the state of states, they bring out a particular issue dedicated to performance of different states at different heads. Now, you'd be surprised that the MARG survey brought out that UP police had taken a quantum jump in better law and order administration in the country. Now, you are looking at the incidents from one particular angle. But here is a survey which was carried out among a cross-section of people across the country and across the state of UP also. I think UP you have in mind at the moment. And they all voted in favor of that. We are witnessing much better law and order today. In fact, UP jumped to number 2 position, perhaps, in terms of law and order. The second best improved state in the country in terms of law and order. Now, the matter has gone before the judiciary also, this matter of demolitions. And every time the state government has taken the stand, I cannot vouch for the correctness of their stand. I cannot. But every time the state government has taken this stand, that we have gone strictly by the letter of the law. These constructions were unauthorized. They were built by these people. This was not taken notice of earlier, but once it came to our notice, I mean, we issued them appropriate notices under relevant sections of whatever the law on the subject was. They did not respond to those notices. Time elapsed. And once the time elapsed and you had not given any explanation, we are authorized and competent to carry out the demolition. So the demolition may appear to be an extreme step, but it is strictly within the letter of the law. If it was an unauthorized construction raised by people taking advantage of a situation, and there was no sanction, municipal sanction, local LA authority sanction, then demolition was absolutely in order. Now, this matter went to the Supreme Court also, and they said they should be, Supreme Court should order a ban on all such demolitions. Supreme Court refused to give the order. Said, how can we give such a blanket order against demolitions? I mean, some demolitions may be in order. Some may not be in order. So if any demolition is not in order, you bring the facts of those cases to our notice and we'll take cognizance of that. But we can't issue a blanket order against demolitions. This was the stand taken by the Supreme Court. Now, demolitions may appear to many people as a very radical step, a very stringent measure. But the point is, if it is justified by law of the land, then what's wrong with it? And it has carried a strong message that if you incite communal problem, if you play with fire, if you try to create instability, if you try to spread a violent atmosphere, then we are going to take very strong action against you. And wherever such strict action has taken place, I am told the communal elements are subdued and they are humbled.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you are looking at it from the point of view of a journalist, you said. Yes, please do. I mean, there's no harm in a journalist point of view, but please investigate particular cases and see if the law of the land was violated or it was carried out lawfully. I mean, that is something to be investigated. I can't do that. I can't do that. I
But
just
sir,
read.
just to slightly, I mean, probe you here. If I were a Hindu sitting in UP and not protesting, and even if my house was perhaps not built on absolute legal grounds, nobody would come demolishing it. But if I'm a minority protesting, there is a reason to demolish my house. Don't you think the timing of demolition seemed curious to you?
But why are you giving it communal color? Why should we talk in of Hindu or a minority? Why should we talk?
Because
They,
the
the
houses that
government
were
the government
demolished
says
were
no.
largely
No,
minorities.
I do not know. I do not know. I mean, they say
I do
some.
know, sir. I
Maybe you know
Yes,
better. But in the Gujarat riots also, they say there so many Hindus were killed, so many Muslims were killed. Yes, one number may be more, the other number may be less, but a very large number of Hindus were killed in Gujarat riots also. So Gujarat
riots
color
were
riots is
partly.
also
I
no
understand
Gujarat
this.
riots is also given a different color by a large number of people. But the Supreme Court has found nothing wrong with the Gujarat riots. Now, whom do we believe? The SIT? Do we disbelieve the SIT? Do we disbelieve the Supreme Court? Then whom do we believe? Should we call somebody from outside to decide what happened in Gujarat? I really don't know what was the truth. I mean, I myself get confused at times when I find a very large volume large volume coming in criticism of certain event, and then by all the constitutionally appointed bodies. I mean, they say that there's nothing wrong.
Mm.
And the way you are trying, the way others are trying to paint, that didn't happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to, obviously, the Supreme Court has given a clean chit to certain political parties and certain political members of the political organizations. There's absolutely no doubt. I'm going to raise on that. I absolutely am a believer of judiciary. But as far as the matter sub judice is concerned, and what we are seeing around us, there is a tension in the atmosphere that if you are to protest against the government, there is a possibility of the police, a compliant police, knocking at your doors, and that possibility has increased in the last couple of years. Would you disagree with that?
No, I disagree with the communal color which you are giving it. I would say anybody violating the law, anybody raising an unauthorized construction, if it is demolished, it is absolutely fine. There is no problem with it.
Mhm.
Forget about what he has done, what his background is, what the color of his skin is, what is his religion. That is not relevant for me.
Mhm.
So if you can produce, say that, look, in the case of Mr. X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, I haven't said 10, 15 cases. If somebody can say that no, the demolitions were unauthorized, illegal, but I think, are we not diverting from the subject matter of
Absolutely.
today's
I
discussion?
absolutely. I'm going to come back to the discussion, sir. It's interesting, since we were talking about police excesses. One of the criticism of your books, and since we are just, I think, about to finish we are in the last section of our 60 minutes. One of the criticisms of your books I've read in various newspapers is that you've talked about what happened in Godhra. You've also briefly touched upon what happened in Maharashtra, in Bihar, UP. But recent police related excesses have not been touched upon. For example, the CAA, NRC riots, etc. Where do you stand as far as police excesses during the last couple of years is concerned, the
Look,
contemporary
look,
events?
Look, it is not a history of contemporary events. It's not a political commentary. It's a commentary on. It said, I have discussed essentially the subject. The subject matter is police, and police performance in some important cases have been taken. I could not have taken. I mean, then the book would have. Do you know? Let me tell you, the book as it has been published is only 75% of. I mean, I had to reduce it by at least 25%. It was much more voluminous. But Rupa said, no, sir, this is becoming too thick. We won't be able to publish it. It will become very expensive. So I reduced the volume of the book at 3 stages. I mean, first I reduced it another 10 pages, again another 10 pages, another 15. It went on until it came to, say, about 400 pages. They said, now we can go ahead. So it was much more voluminous. I mean, if you want this also to come, that also, I mean, it is not an encyclopedia on police. It's a book on police, and not book also police in one volume, which is readable by an average reader. So I mean, there are 101 things which I could have said. the 101 other things also which I could have said, which I could have written about, but then it should be crisp, and you should not become too much of an inflection on your reading time also.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and if you talk of communal problem, I think if you go from independence time to this day, I think more than 700 incidents have been documented. I read in some book. So if I had to mention all those 700 incidents, probably the book would have gone into 2,000 pages.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So in which case, my last question to you, I think we're in the last leg of our time here. What would be your one message through the book to perhaps a young budding police officer who would want to read this and want to join the police forces? What would be your big message through the book to an average viewer, maybe a young police officer who's aspiring to join the forces at this point in time? What exactly are your big learnings from your career?
My message to young police officers always is, you start building your reputation as an upright officer from day one. Why I say this? Because some officers say that थोड़े दिन मजा कर लें, उसके बाद देखा जाएगा. That attitude you have to start building your reputation from day one. And if you do that, a time comes when people know that Mr. X is like that. Don't take chances with him. Don't take liberties with him. Don't go with any wrong request to him. You build that reputation. Yes, and I can testify that. A whole lot of people would not come to me. भाई इनके पास जाना बेकार है, ये बात सुनेंगे नहीं. So start building your reputation from day one and stick to the right path, irrespective of the setbacks in your career. Setbacks, there are bound to be. Police career is so difficult now, so difficult, so tough, so complicated that setbacks there will be. But if you stick to the right path, ultimately, you will keep on bouncing back. You will keep on bouncing back. The unseen divine forces would be there to help you. And don't go after Godfathers. Go after God, and He'll be there to protect you all along. So stick to the right path.
Okay. Mr. Singh, absolute pleasure, sir, speaking with you. So much learning and takeaways from, of course, the last 25 years of your activism, and then prior to that, your illustrious career in the Indian Police Forces. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.